Dissidia Final Fantasy is a great game for the PlayStation Portable, but the fact that it's for the PlayStation Portable probably means that a lot of people have heard of it, but not actually played it. In short, Dissidia is a game created with a simple yet awesome goal. Make the fight scenes from the Final Fantasy movie Advent Children playable. While most people don't like the movie, most people agree that the fight scenes are amazing. Drawing heavily on Kingdom Hearts, this is less a fighting game and more an action game that happens to have a fighting motif. You can choose from a selection of 30 Final Fantasy heroes and villains, and have them fight it out. Since this is a Final Fantasy game, it has a pretty extensive single-player story, the basic gist being two gods, Chaos and Cosmos, summon a bunch of Final Fantasy characters to fight a never-ending war. Basically, a perfect excuse to fight. Mechanically, what makes Dissidia so unique is the way it translates anime into gameplay mechanics. Have you ever wondered why anime characters always waste their time using a bunch of weak attacks before finally unleashing their final big move? That's the core mechanic of Dissidia. You have two types of attacks, generally fast but weak moves called bravery attacks, and heavy moves called hit point attacks. Bravery attacks don't actually damage your opponent, but rather lower their bravery count while raising your own. The amount of bravery you have determines how much damage a hit point attack will do. The game is also far more vertical than any fighting game I've ever seen. You have a whole bunch of mobility moves, such as jumping incredibly high, wall running up any surface, jumping across huge chasms, and being able to dash in mid-air at any point. Using your mobility to position yourself is important to the game, as most characters are limited to 12 attacks, 6 bravery and 6 hit point. You use the different attacks by tilting towards or away from your opponent, and you have a different moveset depending on if you're in the air or on the ground. You also have your usual guards and dodges, as well as a special form and an ultimate attack you can use by filling up a gauge. The sequel added a second gauge that allowed you to summon an assistant character, which added more combo potential. And there's a whole nother system involving summons that can be used to impact bravery in a variety of ways. For a long time it seemed like we'd never get another Dissidia game, until suddenly another one was announced. Right now it's in arcades in Japan, but it's all but confirmed that it's coming to the PlayStation 4 as well. They've confirmed a minimum of a whopping 50 characters, so at least 20 more than the last game, and have already confirmed a personal favorite of mine, Ramza from Final Fantasy Tactics. While the mechanics of this game look a bit different from the previous ones, that's not stopping me from being excited. And that's why I put together this list, characters I want in the new Dissidia. And without any more ado, let's get into it.
Number 15!
This first pick is really more of a formality, which is why I put it so low on the list. Noctis from Final Fantasy 15 is basically a shoo-in. In terms of personality, we really don't know that much about him, but we know a lot about what he can do in terms of fighting. Being able to summon a wide variety of weapons, teleport around, create a shield, there's all sorts of possibilities here. And I think I know a good idea for what they should go with. In the previous Dissidia games, after winning a fight, you'd gain AP, which let you master the abilities you had equipped. Once you mastered certain combat abilities, you'd unlock new follow-up attacks. For a simple example, chaining Thunder into Thundergar or something like that. I think Noctis should take full advantage of this, and have a wide variety of follow-up attacks the player can choose. Letting the player build their own combo could make Noctis a truly versatile fighter.
Number 14!
You'd think the character on the cover of a game would be the main character. And really, Ace from Final Fantasy Type 0 is billed as the main character. But really, there's nothing that actually sets him apart from his fellow classmates. He's not the leader, he doesn't have any special plot importance, and yet there he is all over the covers, advertising, and everything. And because of that, I think he'll be getting in before the more important characters like Machina and Rem. That said, if Type 0 were to get 2 slots, I'd definitely say Machina should be in the game as well. Especially because that gives Ace someone to bounce off of. In terms of combat possibilities, Ace is pretty unlike any other fighter we've seen so far, since he fights with cards. The majority of his abilities involve stacking his deck with beneficial effects, though he can also throw his cards as a ranged attack, as well as teleport and set traps using his cards. I think he could make a great counter to Final Fantasy II's Emperor, who is a trap-focused character, since there are no heroic trap-focused characters yet. He also has a bunch of magic abilities to pull on, and though I don't know how, I feel like Type 0's Phantoma harvesting mechanic might be integrated, the same way that Squall from Final Fantasy VIII now uses that game's draw mechanic as one of his abilities.
Number 13!
It's weird to think that Seymour, as the main antagonist of Final Fantasy X, hasn't made it into Dissidia yet. Though I can understand why. They went with Tidus and Jecht in the first game, and the most obvious character to add after that is Yuna, which they did in the sequel. But now it's about time they added Seymour, especially now that he can work off of Yuna, who is already a character. Seymour has a bunch of boss battles he can draw abilities from, but beyond that, he also has a bunch of zombie and death-related attacks he can use. He also has the ability to summon the Aeon Anima, which could be an awesome ultimate attack. Although, like every other Final Fantasy X character, Seymour does have an overdrive as well. I'm not sure how practical it would be, but I'd love to see him use the Mortiarchus from his boss battle. It could drain his health to do something. I don't know.
Number 12.
Vayne is another character that just never made it into Dissidia for some reason. Like Seymour, he's Final Fantasy XII's main antagonist. The problem is, Final Fantasy XII had a lot of worthy candidates for Dissidia. So while they got the obvious ones out of the way by including Gabranth and Vaughn, I think it'll be very difficult for people to agree on which character deserves the next role the most. I know a lot of people want characters like Balthier, Basch, Ash, maybe even Redis, I don't know. But personally, I think the villain side needs a bit more filling out, and I think Vayne would be a great addition. Ivalice's stories have always been a bit more competently written than other Final Fantasy games. So while many of the villains seen in Dissidia are simply snarling, darkness-fueled villains, Vayne is a bit more complex, viewing his actions as just, since he's trying to free humanity from the tyranny of the gods. Which I want to point out is something that a lot of the heroes of Final Fantasy have done using pretty much the same methods. He himself is a hand-to-hand combat expert, able to hold off your entire party in a boss fight. But then eventually he fuses it with the Sky Fortress Bahamut, and from there he gets all sorts of other abilities, including obvious ones based on Bahamut's usual abilities. Overall, Vayne would be a nice wrench to throw into the usual villain dynamic.
Number 11.
Every fighting game needs a character that's simple to use to help ease the player into their mechanics. Previous Dissidia games used Lightning and Cloud for this, but they were still a bit technical. But I think I found a character that fits the role perfectly, and that's Benjamin from Mystic Quest. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is notorious for oversimplifying the JRPG to the point of barely being interactive, long before Final Fantasy XIII was even a glimmer in Motomo Toriyama's eye. But this simplicity is exactly what makes Benjamin perfect. He has a whole bunch of moves he can draw on, since he can use magic, has a wide variety of weapons, ranging from traditional swords to weirder things like bombs. And he has the means to have long range, short range, and mid range attacks. Therefore, he's the perfect character to have simple versions of every type of attack you'll be using for all the other characters. Also, having Mystic Quest representation also means the possibility of having Mystic Quest music, and that's just good news for everyone. Also, Benjamin's ultimate attack should be using Cure on the enemy for 99999 damage.
Number 10.
I'll be honest, I'm really glad that Laguna from Final Fantasy VIII made it into Dissidia, but I'm really confused as to why Cypher didn't make it in, since he's such a popular character. Cypher is Squall's anime rival, and an underling to Ultimecia, so he fits into the story like a missing puzzle piece. It's a bit tricky to think of a moveset, since he has a gunblade like Squall and can use Guardian Forces like Squall. Besides that, Cypher only really has two claims to fame: being a really weak boss that you keep alive just to grind for some good spells, and somehow countering Odin's signature moves and Tetskin by doing absolutely nothing. I think Cypher could work as a more technical version of Squall, sort of like how Squall's trigger move in the game is really simple, while Cypher's is needlessly complex. I could see him also being used as a reverse version of Squall. While Squall's moves were all based around launching your enemies into the ground, Cypher's could be about juggling them in the air.
Number 9.
This is going to be a bit of a weird one, since I'm recommending a character from a game I haven't played and have avoided spoilers for. But basically, I've heard that Noct from Final Fantasy Dimensions is a really good character. Basically, this guy called Dastardly Duke made a video about it. and I trust his word, so yeah, put an act in. I don't know what he can do. Dimensions just uses the job system like Final Fantasy V, so I'm not sure he has any distinct abilities. But I really want to see more spin-off games represented in Dissidia, so yeah, add an act. You want to find out why? Ask Dastardly Duke at Dastardly Duke on Twitter.
Number 8.
I've heard that the devs of Dissidia want to put Min Woo in as the next Final Fantasy II representative. That's all well and good, but I really can't see how a moveset would work based around a character who is primarily a white mage. Sure, he could use Holy or Ultima, but I just don't know what could make him unique. Personally, I think Leon deserves the slot more. Both friend and foe of Firion, the main character of Final Fantasy II, the dynamic is already there. Of course, Final Fantasy II has the unique problem of having every character be good at everything if you train them enough, so making a moveset's a bit difficult. But that's why I think Leon fits. He's Final Fantasy's first Dark Knight type character. And while we've always had Cecil, he isn't primarily a Dark Knight, he also can turn into a Paladin. I think Leon could be made to make use of the traditional Dark Knight abilities, namely sacrificing things in order to power up his moves. I can't think of exactly how to balance it off the top of my head, but the best I can think of is maybe make it so that if you hold down the button, you can sacrifice part of his bravery to power up his abilities, maybe adding a defense crush or drastically speeding up or doing way more damage, something like that. As long as his moves are relatively hard to use, this could make him a great risk-reward character.
Number 7.
Final Fantasy XIII is going to get a lot of new characters. I know a lot of people don't like that, but that's just the way it is. Right now they've only got one character, Lightning, and there's 3 games. That said, because there's 3 games, it's a bit hard to choose who would make the cut. The other 5 party members from the first game could all bring unique things to the table. Hope uses a boomerang, something we haven't seen in the game so far. Vanilla and Fang could both be turned into very different types of saboteurs. Snow could do something interesting with the Sentinel role, and Saz... I don't know, honestly. He doesn't really have much going for him. Besides party members, there's also Nabat, who I think would be a bit hard to work with. Or Sid Raines, who everybody seems to love for some reason. But I already have Seymour on the list, so... I was pretty heavily considering having Bartandalus, the enemy of Final Fantasy XIII, but then I just figured, you know who would work better? Caius, the villain of Final Fantasy XIII too. He has so many more moves, he's just a more interesting character, and you wouldn't have to make nearly as many concessions with him, as Bartandalus is basically a transformer, while Caius is just a person-shaped person. He constantly fights against Lightning in both 13.2 and Lightning Returns, which makes him a perfect character for a dynamic with her. And he just has so many moves to draw on. He uses his roles just like your characters do, so he can use powerful magic, powerful physical attacks, and heal himself. And then beyond that, he also has the power to summon Chaos Bahamut. Not only does that give his moveset even more potential, but it makes for an obvious ultimate attack as well.
Number 6.
Despite having one of the largest casts in all of Final Fantasy VI got the shaft in Dissidia. It was one of the games that was skipped over when it came to deciding which games to add characters from. Now granted, Final Fantasy VI's huge cast is full of great picks that makes deciding just one pretty much impossible. But I think we all know the most obvious pick. Celes. She's the second protagonist of the game. When to make it past the halfway point, focus shifts away from Terra and onto Celes. However, if she's represented in the story of the game, they should draw on an earlier point in the story and make her a villain, as a parallel to how she begins the game serving the evil empire from Final Fantasy VI. Now while I think Celes is the next obvious choice for Final Fantasy VI representation, I have no idea what to do with her for a moveset. Her unique ability is called Runic, and all it does is absorb magic and turn it into MP. This can't exactly translate into a fighting game where many characters don't use magic, and some of them use only magic, so to either be useless or overpowered. The best I could come up with is maybe using it as some sort of guard move instead. Maybe it could counter magic with magic and physical with physical. Although she is still distinct in that she's a swordsmaster and also capable of using magic. Maybe that's all it would take to make her unique. And that's the first half of my Dissidia Most Wanted list. Tune in next time for my final picks, and who knows, there might just be some surprise picks you didn't see coming. But you know what? It's not just my opinion that matters, so next time, I've invited some guests. And in the meantime, What about you? Who do you want to see in the new Dissidia? Anyways, as usual, you can leave a positive comment or a comment about how there's no Final Fantasy VII characters on this list below. And hey, if you like this video, check out the Dastardly Duke's top 10 Final Fantasy characters. It's basically the same as this video. Or if you want more Final Fantasy from me, you can check out my most recent video and look at how a Final Fantasy VII HD remake would work. If you want more Dissidia themed white noise, you can follow me at Hatta Talk on Twitter. And with that, see you next time.